The Soul Society arc containing both the sneak entry and rescue sub-arcs is one of the best arcs of a story I've seen in quite a while, with amazingly brilliant fights full of stunning visuals, exposition to the world of the Soul Society, and most particularly, the drippiest characters I may have ever seen in anime being the captains. This was an absolute blast. However, due to the lengths of these combined arcs, they'll be split into two videos, this video covering the sneak entry portion. The mission attempting the rescue of our favorite character thus far within the series of Rukia was nothing short of spectacular, and I was on the edge of my seat throughout this arc. If you're new to this adventure we're taking together as I embark upon the amazing story of Bleach with no prior knowledge of the series, then welcome to the family, I appreciate you. These are my completely blind thoughts, impressions, and review of Bleach. Thus begins our adventure into the Soul Society arc, the sneak entry. Soul Society, from the general consensus I've gathered, seems to be well loved by the Bleach community, and I can absolutely see why. This arc changes the landscape completely of the story we've learned thus far, and it veers from the Scooby-Doo monster hunting vibe we got during the first part of the story. I had initial trepidation on whether or not I'd like this change, but to my enjoyment, I found this transition overwhelmingly smooth and refreshing. The ability to shift somewhat the theme and aura of the story is something that I don't think many other authors can do, and Kubo does this in excellent fashion. This arc begins fast-paced as always, as Bleach seems to do, which is a refreshing part of the series I love once more. We don't have to wait around for much action. The arc starts off with Ichigo, Uryu, Urahime, Yoruichi, and Chad arriving within Soul Society. Immediately, the aesthetic of the Soul Society really surprised me. It seemed very much like the regular world, except not nearly as modern. Rather, it mimics the feudal theme that the Soul Reapers possess. I was expecting Soul Society to be somewhat of an ethereal place, given it's an afterlife, but tons of those living in Soul Society live in impoverished circumstances with tons of districts for what is known as Rukon. Rukon seems to hold the vast majority of individuals, and as you get deeper and deeper into the districts, the quality of life deteriorates. The Soul Reapers protect these individuals, yet seemingly only through defeating Hollows, which aids to the realization that I'm coming to that Soul Reapers aren't inherently good or altruistic individuals. A question that came to mind in the exposition to this was whether some people were born into the Soul Society and know nothing different from it. The dynamic of the Soul Society to me is entirely another existence rather than a traditional afterlife, which is an interesting concept and choice I didn't expect for the afterlife to be. We quickly learn that those in the Rukon district cannot easily pass into the Seirete in which the Soul Reapers live. In fact, it's actually forbidden, and there's even a guard of the wall of the Seirete. The seeming disparity in the states of living emanates the caste type system that Soul Society seems to embody. The Soul Reapers living in the most grandiose state, and the relatively normal souls meagerly living in various districts. Ichigo defeats the guard of the wall, and briefly they're able to see into the Seirete, but they're stopped by none other than Captain Jin Ichimaru, who defeats Ichigo and expels him from entering the Seirete. Despite Ichigo's training and power-up, he currently isn't able to overcome this power deficit of a captain, which is expected, but a current limitation that in fact doesn't last long at all. Jin's character design immediately struck me, as he has a creepy facial expression of always smiling with his eyes closed, and it struck me as his design being reflective of his character. He comes across as shady, plotting, and deceitful. While contemplating ways to get into the Seirete to rescue our lovely Rukia, Yoruichi suggests going to the home of Kukaku Shiba, and the night before they do so, Ichigo butts heads with a man named Ganju. At first I thought Ganju would be a bypassing character, but he actually serves as a prominent character throughout this arc. With gruff appearance and hot-headedness, him and Ichigo are obviously at opposition with each other due to their similar demeanor. The plot progresses pretty fast through going to Kukaku Shiba's house, and her house was interesting to say the least. It was quite too flashy for my liking, but most importantly what was flashing was Kukaku's outfit. I didn't expect her to look the way she did. In fact, I wasn't even expecting her to be a woman, but she was designed with some taste that Kubo seems to have in women, and I think you absolutely know what I mean. Despite that unique trait he tends to design female characters with, most importantly, he designs characters with immense fashion and unique style. I haven't encountered another mangaka who takes so much time to make every even moderately important character have such a standout design. I'm a sucker for characters that stand out and are aesthetic, so I love both reading and watching simply due to how amazing everyone freaking looks. Kukaku is a fireworks expert, and she agrees to fire the gang into the Seirete, although they'd have to slightly train first to control their spirit energy, but what I've quickly learned is that the training is somewhat brief, as every character seems to learn fast, Ichigo being slightly slower than the others, but even then, that's saying something because it is absolutely less than an episode for all of them to train. Ichigo in his training emanates so much raw spirit energy, it's actually overwhelming, and due to this continual reinforcement of the immense raw power he possesses, it foreshadows that Ichigo is no normal individual. I am completely unaware of his heritage, but there is something about Ichigo that suggests if he were to harness this power, he'd easily be one of the strongest individuals within this story. Through this training, we're exposed to more of Gonju, who is Kukaku's brother who harbors a hatred towards Soul Reapers due to their brother being killed by one despite being a Shinigami himself. I'm sure there's much more to this story that we'll soon find out. Ichigo and the gang are then shot into the Seireitei, but they're separated from each other, and from here on out the majority of what occurs involves Ichigo and the captains as we're exposed to more and more of how Soul Reapers operate, and we're presented absolutely brilliant fights. Chad, Orihime, and Uryu do take a bit of a backseat during this time, but they nonetheless have good story time and some amazing fights themselves. Due to Jin letting the infiltrators live, the captains assemble, and my god, I was awaiting this moment to see all 13 captains together. Brilliantly designed with an aura of power around them, you immediately know from first impression that these are strong, badass individuals. The captains seem to have strife amongst each other, however, and they hold some suspicion towards Jin for letting Ichigo and the others live. During this meeting, the aim was to decide what type of repercussions Jin will have, but the intruder alarm rings due to Ichigo and the rest infiltrating the Seireitei bubble, thus sending the captains into action. A notable interaction that takes place is that Aizen tells Jin that this alarm is in fact quite convenient and not to underestimate him. The ominous and serious tone of Aizen was in stark contrast to his soft appearance and the aura he and other scenes emanates. Aizen, in terms of his personality, caught my attention immediately, notably in his interaction with Renji in which he discusses Rukia's sentence. Aizen says that in fact it was far too severe for her crime and there's likely something else at play, or rather, someone else behind this. Rukia's sentence is a punishment, but not a typical punishment, rather a capital punishment, and her execution was even pushed up to be sooner than initially anticipated. This severity of punishment does indeed suggest that there is far more to this story. Aizen seems to be looking out for Rukia, and subsequently he looks out for one of his former subordinates within Renji. Aizen's seemingly good-heartedness and gentle appearance quickly solidified him as my second favorite captain, not to mention that he has devilish looks, but I'm sure you could guess throughout this arc who my favorite captain is, and we'll get to him later. Speaking of Rukia's execution, she was moved to the Palace of Penitence, in which prisoners can look out at their own execution grounds and repent their sins daily. Once more, an intense execution protocol for Rukia. Our best girl Rukia, now in a tall tower, subjected to isolation in her final days. Thematically, a beautiful woman in a tower waiting to be rescued is something that aids to my own headcanon of the Rukia and Ichigo shipping. Within the infiltration into the bubble, outside of Ichigo's fights, there's two notable fights for the group of Orihime and Uryu and Chad. Chad faces off versus Kyoraku, who is a captain. Despite Chad's strength, he's beaten but spared. Kyoraku is another brilliant example of an interestingly designed character. With a pink flower-themed outfit, he stands out immediately. He has a relaxed and calm disposition and is pervy towards his own lieutenant, which added for some comedy whilst in the chaos of battling throughout this infiltration. To add to this lightheartedness, his lieutenant throws down flower petals before he fights for aesthetic purposes alone. It does not aid to the fight, rather it simply just looks cool. Captain Kuraku is one of my favorite captains thus far, as he seems to have honor and surprisingly a lack of desire to fight those who he deems as adequate people. His personality is a stark contrast to Jin, whose entire demeanor is the opposite of honor. If you guys haven't realized already, these names are a little bit hard to pronounce for some of these captains, so if I am wrong about them, particularly this captain I just referenced, please do not crucify me. I'm sorry. Through this fight, we're given the backstory of Chad, and although it's pretty brief, it gives exposition to how he became such a gentle giant due to the impact from his grandfather. This backstory solidifies his relationship with Ichigo and why he has such an undying loyalty, so much loyalty that he'd risk his life without hesitation for Ichigo while on this mission. I've noticed so far that Kubo doesn't flesh out too many characters, at least where I'm at in terms of lengthy backstories or individual character arcs, which I'm actually okay with because despite the backstories being short-winded, they're poignant and impactful, which allows me as a reader to still feel for these individuals and have a connection with them. Drawn out backstory lasting episodes on top of episodes. But given how the story has gone thus far, I really highly doubt it. Uryu and Orihime's fight versus Jirobo the Windrunner, who's a 4th of a squad, went quite well and obviously went in the favor of Uryu and Orihime. Uryu's demeanor of an edgy, strong character persists, and to my surprise, he has a dichotomy of that nature with also being a slightly embarrassed, kind-hearted person. Him and Orihime have various interactions sneaking around the Soul Society, and Orihime throughout this grows on me as she genuinely makes me chuckle several times with her ditzy persona. However, the central focus of this infiltration is our protagonist within Ichigo, who's joined by Ganju. Ichigo faces off versus an individual named Ikoku, and it's surprising how close of a fight it was. However, throughout this arc in Ichigo's fights, he exponentially grows in strength from each fight as he gains experience and learns more about utilizing spirit energy. This quick evolution of Ichigo quickly establishes that he won't be a character slowly gaining strength like most shonen, rather, he is more powerful within each fight in the more experience he gains. With the defeat of Ukoku and Ganju's defeat of his opponent, they take Hanataro as an initial captive who's part of the medic squad, but now an ally as he has a common goal of saving Rukia as well. Hanataro is a pretty comedic character who you can feel bad for at times due to his scared nature, but his innocence quickly weighed heavily on my heart as he made a worthy member to this trio in rescuing Rukia and leading Ichigo towards the Palace of Penitence. Once they arrive close to the palace, Ichigo faces off versus Renji, who he had bested before within the end of the last arc, but we learn that within the Soul Society, a Soul Reaper is 5 times stronger and that this fight won't be as easily won. Through this battle, Ichigo's confident persona was encapsulating, and he battles with resolve, quite literally. The battle shows us the training Urahara put him through and the resolve required. He can have no doubt in his mind, he needs an iron will. When he parries, he shouldn't get cut. When he saves, he won't let someone die. When he attacks, he kills. The previous hesitation he had within fighting was eliminated, and now Ichigo is able to emit his resolve. This aura around him, similar to the aura as we once saw with his initial fight with Renji, is now far more controlled. Rather than like a wild animal full of rage, he's controlled in his power and he defeats Renji. He tells Renji he simply doesn't want to save Rukia, he will save Rukia, and Renji, now understanding this, tells him to do just that. I found this fight beautifully animated with the music hitting just at the right times. Once more, the evolution of Ichigo fight to fight is further pronounced. Now beating a lieutenant, all that's left is a captain. From here it ensues the backstory of Rukia and Renji, growing up together in poverty and being best friends for a long time. I found it a slight retcon that when they first saw each other, they seemingly didn't greet each other as if they've known each other the entirety of their lives, but perhaps I'm reading too much into their first encounter. Additionally, Renji's interactions with Rukia suggest he has a crush on her, which is again Kubo setting up a potential love interest if Rukia and Ichigo don't work out. I'm not a huge fan of this, but perhaps it's due to my current lack of interest in Renji, as he's only been an antagonist thus far. I enjoyed seeing Rukia embodying the same persona as a child and getting to know more of her backstory, and the fact that she has always been a talented individual, in fact somewhat of a savant. This was the longest backstory we've seen thus far, but it was only one episode, a phenomenal one at that, and after watching it I have a much stronger connection to Renji, but most importantly, my favorite character within Rukia. What came next in the story surprised me and honestly saddened me. With the defeat of Renji, the captains now were in wartime orders where they can carry their Zanpakuto and unleash it if necessary, further elevating the seriousness that Ichigo and the gang have presented to the Soul Society. Hinamori, who is a lieutenant under Aizen, was warned of Ichimaru and eventually goes to Aizen's room late at night as he writes a letter. Aizen welcomes her with open arms and comfort, and he demonstrates his love for those in his squad and those who were previously in his squad. In fact, when Byakuya tried to discharge Renji for losing, Aizen spoke up against this and helped ensure Renji would stay in his position. He demonstrates care for everyone who's important to him, Hinamori and Renji being two of these individuals. While Hinamori sits with Aizen as he writes, she eventually falls asleep, and Aizen lets her sleep soundly in his room, not wanting to wake or disturb her. Hinamori, when waking up, realized that she was tardy to her meeting, and so she runs and takes a shortcut to reach it. However, on the way she finds Aizen, the man she cares for and admires, killed in cold blood, a lifeless body. Aizen, my second favorite captain, now dead before us, saddened me because I had such high expectations for him as a character. His care for others, his influence and aura he emanated was encapsulating. It surprised me as well because he told Jin not to underestimate him, and that confidence in such a statement usually isn't just a front. Now with the captain dead, others arrive, and of those individuals is Jin. Jin, with no remorse for Aizen's death, continues his creepy and lifeless smile, which suggests to me that he's the culprit. However, for things like this, I doubt it's always so straightforward. This causes Hinamori to strike out and try to kill Jin, but she's stopped and imprisoned for attacking a captain and releasing her Zanpakuto. Notably, within the release of her Zanpakuto, I can see that they don't behave like normal swords when they're released and can have all kinds of different properties that are nothing like a sword. Hers, for instance, shot a damn energy ball. This exposition of Zanpakuto makes me question how many properties they can take and how many they can emanate. I understand Hinamori's rage. Hell, I love Aizen too, perhaps not to the same level she does. She seems to be a little bit obsessed, but nonetheless, he better not be out of the story. Finally though, we reach the pinnacle of the first sub-arc of the Soul Society. Ichigo encounters the infamous Kenpachi. Kenpachi's squad is known as the strongest squad, and damn, I can absolutely see why. Kenpachi full of battle scars, crazy hair, and an eye patch, he immediately strikes me as someone with immense combat prowess, and in fact, a little bit crazed. Kenpachi had searched for Ichigo a long time, and it took him so long because of Yachiro guiding him. I genuinely giggled as Yachiro sat on Kenpachi's shoulder, telling him wrong directions and calling him Kenny. She's super cute, and her voice actor was so fitting of her look. The bond of Yachiro and Kenpachi, despite their completely opposite appearances, was enjoyable to watch. Upon hearing Kenpachi talk more and more, I began to realize that he had the same voice actor and dub as Jiraiya, which threw me off a little bit, but I tried not to think of their differing personalities mismatching their voices. Kenpachi is my absolute favorite captain. Oh my god, I swear the sequence of fights with Kenpachi blew my mind. Kenpachi is a bona fide god of war, and he relishes in his sadism as he both sheds blood and takes lives. In his presence, the aura he emanates is unreal and can be felt across the entire Sarate. This fight was so refreshing visually, I never remotely expected it to be this intense. Kenpachi had traveled far and wide to find someone to challenge him, and Ichigo was that man, however, not initially. Rather, in the beginning of the fight, Kenpachi allows Ichigo to combat him, and we learn that Kenpachi's Zanpakuto is always in its current form. It doesn't have a second form because he simply doesn't need it. He doesn't have a relationship with his Zanpakuto the way other Soul Reapers do. He relies purely on his own power and uses his Zanpakuto merely as a tool rather than as a partnership. Kenpachi's own power is always high. In fact, he has to limit his own power during fights because of how strong he is. Hanataro told Ichigo that the name Kenpachi means those who love war and that it's a title held by the strongest. Ichigo tells them to flee before the fight persisted any further, wanting his allies to be safe. He wasn't sure he was going to win this fight, but he wanted, even in his possible death, for Rukia to be saved. In Kenpachi's base form, he defeats Ichigo, who gets too cocky, and in Ichigo, moments before seeming death, he sees Zangetsu and speaks to him, and is once more taken to the ethereal realm within Zangetsu, in which he has to fight a shadow version of himself. In doing so, the retrospection of Ichigo takes place. He's trained his body, yet he never trained Zangetsu. All he did was call out Zangetsu's name, wanting to use his strength. That they weren't friends. Ichigo promises that he will do whatever Zangetsu teaches him and wants of him, that he won't neglect him, and this allows Ichigo to regain the power of his Zanpakuto. Notably, the Shadow or Hollow Ichigo states that they need Ichigo to survive, and for Zangetsu to train Ichigo well, as he'd one day have his power. To me, this foreshadows that Hollow Ichigo aims to take over Ichigo's body, which could perhaps be why the Hollow Mask is consistently found with Ichigo. Zangetsu in a monologue discusses how much he hates the rain that comes when Ichigo is sad or upset, that he aims to make sure it never rains again, and says that Ichigo will never fight alone as long as he's there. The power of Zangetsu is immense, and God knows the backstory of him. Zangetsu seems to be a lonely entity existing within the soul or the mind of Ichigo. I have no idea how this concept works, but I'm thrilled to see what happens next. Ichigo, now with Zangetsu back, fights Kenpachi once more, and in merely seconds he's gotten infinitely stronger, able to go toe-to-toe with the Kenpachi who previously would destroy him in a heartbeat without hesitation. Ichigo during this fight cuts up Kenpachi, and watching Kenpachi relish in this was absolute insanity. Eventually Kenpachi states that he'll go all out, and in this scene, I lost my damn mind. Kenpachi removes his eye patch, and his eye patch limits his own power to make sure he doesn't unleash too much. Yes, Kenpachi literally wears an eye patch to nerf himself. This guy is absolutely bonkers, and I don't know how the hell he got so strong, but I am all here for it. Yachiro during this fight points out this is the most fun Kenny's had in ages, and proceeds to fight Ichigo all out. Kenpachi with a yellow aura around him truly changes the battlefield due to his sheer force of will. In a brilliant visual clash, Ichigo and Kenpachi both attack each other and subsequently fade from the wounds and the damage. Ichigo surpassing the ranks of defeating subordinates, from lieutenants to now a captain. The strongest captain at that, it is merely a testament to Ichigo and Zangetsu's power. Their fight was not just a physical one, it was a clash of ideology of Kenpachi believing his own strength to be supreme, and Ichigo having the belief that the strength of him and Zangetsu as partners is even stronger. Yachiro takes Kenpachi to help him recover, and Yoruichi takes Ichigo to recover as well. After Kenpachi's stalemate, we see the brief backstory of him and Yachiro, which was touching. Both outcasts with no names, they found meaning within each other's friendship. This brief flashback showed me that even brute individuals like Kenpachi have their darkness, their demons. In his case, at a point, loneliness and lack of identity. Identity and loneliness he alleviated through friendship and his passion of combat. Upon acknowledging his defeat, he states he needs to become stronger and that he owes Ichigo. If Kenpachi can still grow in strength, then I absolutely can't wait. Given he said he owes Ichigo, I imagine they'll be allies in battle one day, and I can't wait for it, as they really kind of parallel each other's fighting style. Their fight on the side of Kenpachi, there was no rage, no anger, no animosity, rather just enjoyment of battle. Kenpachi's power-up could be in the acknowledgement that he can't fully rely on his own power to be the complete strongest, that he needs his Zanpakuto. If you watched Kenpachi's fight and weren't compelled to physically train, then I'm sad to say you've missed out, because I absolutely killed the gym after watching a man so dedicated to combat prowess fight. Kenpachi stole a show from me in this arc, the solidification of my expectations of a captain and what fights are to come in this story. He was a proving ground for Ichigo to solidify his role as a strong protagonist, but most importantly, a protagonist with the resolve to save someone he loves within Rukia. That no matter who stands before him, Ichigo will push past them to achieve his objective. It's not a matter of whether he can or can't do something. His objective is inevitable. This character trait is why I love Ichigo. His cocky, determined nature is something I think we can all add elements of to our own life. That what we pursue isn't merely a possibility, but rather inevitable. While Ichigo recovers once more, we see that a hollow mask saved him from fatal wounds. Yoruichi asked where it came from, and Ichigo told her that he thought it was thrown away, but it reappeared once more and saved him. Seeing that Yoruichi had obvious concern on her face due to the implications of that mask, and from what I presume, it's related to the hollow Ichigo we saw in the other realm. Ichigo brings up a valid point in these moments, suggesting how could Yoruichi move him around given that she's a cat, and Yoruichi reveals her true self. My god, I didn't expect this either. Yoruichi's true form is a beautiful young woman who happens to be naked in front of Ichigo, and she toys with Ichigo asking if he's never seen a naked woman before. Yoruichi is absolutely stunning visually in her design, and once more it's exemplified that Kubo does not mess around when it comes to designing amazing looking characters. This twist surprised me most of all due to the voice changes. Yoruichi as a cat has an obvious male voice, but in her true form she's a woman. Kukaku to now Yoruichi were surprised with these individuals being beautiful women, and I have no objections for such. Ganju and Hinataro continued their objective of Rukia's rescue and they reach the tower, freeing Rukia. On sight of Ganju seeing Rukia, he realizes that she's the individual who killed her brother, which adds a cloud of mystery behind this. Despite Rukia admitting to doing so, it doesn't fit her character thus far throughout the story. However, we aren't able to reach any conclusions as Byakuya eventually arrives. Hinataro and Ganju, both too noble for their own good despite knowing their disadvantage, they stand before Byakuya. Ganju takes him head on and Byakuya, when learning of Ganju's family, decides to release his Zanpakuto, which split apart into sakura flowers and collided to slice Ganju up. This leads me to believe that perhaps Byakuya was the one who killed Ganju's brother and not Rukia. With Byakuya now about to kill Rukia and Hinataro, Captain Utakate stops Byakuya. This captain again is brilliantly designed, and we learn that he's a captain of Rukia and aims to appeal her execution. In a moment where tension was at an all-time high, Ichigo, who had refused to stay rested as Yoruichi told him to, flies with technology that even Soul Reapers don't have to the tower. With beautiful music playing, Ichigo arrives to the scene to save Rukia and fight Byakuya even in his injured state. Upon seeing Ichigo, Utakate asks if Ichigo is, but he doesn't finish, once more alluding to the fact that Ichigo looks like someone very significant in the story, although still a mystery. Ichigo is no longer the man he previously was, as Byakuya realizes. His spirit energy now exponentially higher than before, his resolve as steadfast as ever. Finally, in the presence of Rukia, Ichigo and her argue as they always do, and it felt wholesome. I had missed their synergy and their duality. Byakuya and Ichigo prepare to face off, but before the battle truly commences, it's stopped by Yoruichi, and Byakuya is full of surprise as she's been missing for nearly 100 years. Yoruichi demonstrates her power and speed as she knocks out Ichigo. She's able to outspeed the Byakuya to save Ichigo and allow him to rest before finally going back to battle. This concludes the arc, as Ichigo will now rest and recover and train for 3 days to master something known as the Bankai, the second form of Zanpakuto. I don't know much about Bankai, but I've heard it in a lot of TikToks and YouTube videos, Bankai. So I'm elated to see this Bankai in action. This ability takes decades to master normally, but Yoruichi aims to have Ichigo achieve this in merely 3 days, and then he'll finally be able to save Rukia with his own hands. This arc had so much exposition to the world of the Soul Society, the captains, and the power system of the story of Bleach. This Soul Society mirrors our own world, full of conflict, desire for power, and economic disparity. The designs of the captains stood out to me the most throughout this arc. Kenpachi, Aizen, Utakate, Byakuya, and all the other captains, and I'm appreciative of how much Kubo put into designing well-thought-out characters whose appearance matches their emotion. Byakuya, with an appearance of royalty, embodies the grandiose and narcissistic royal stigma. Kenpachi, full of battle scars and a crazed smile, fits the chaotic warlike nature of his persona. Aizen, with glasses, a soft and gentle face, matches his personality of caring and thoughtfulness. This choice by Kubo magnifies the brilliant nature of each character, is one of the very big praises I have towards Bleach. I love throughout this arc the evolution of Ichigo, his power increasing and his resolve steadfast. As the story progresses, I have more questions arise that haven't yet been answered. What is the mystery of this hollow mask? Who does Ichigo resemble? How powerful will Kenpachi become? And is Aizen truly dead? I'm sure as we continue this journey, these answers will become more readily apparent. Soul Society enabled the transition of the mystery hollow fighting storyline of the first arc into now the socio-political conflict of the Soul Society, along with the now question of treachery amongst the ranks as tensions begin to rise. What will happen next in this brilliant piece of art by Kubo? I guess we'll have to watch and see. This has been my blind review on Bleach's sneak entry arc, and if you enjoyed and stuck around this long, I do ask you to subscribe as it helps out my channel a ton. If we can learn anything from Bleach thus far, remember, your dreams are inevitable. Be greedier.